Hello, my name is Sky, and this is video 4, my application to HBO's A Game of Thrones, which is being created by George R. R. Martin and David Benioff. So this one I would like to talk about warfare and battlefronts. And this was explored in Creative Assembly's video game series, the Total War series, and in particular Medieval 2. There was one expansion to the game where the campaign was set in the British Isles, and playing that I was like struck, like, wow, this really reminds me of George R. R. Martin's saga or Song of Fire and Ice saga, and like yeah, so anyways, but I was fascinated by, okay, the land is somewhat small, somewhat just spread out north to south. Um, but there's towns and there's castles, and so strategic location of castles. The towns are also strategically located, and that's for the benefit of taking advantage of trade. So natural paths such as rivers and natural earth locations where there's flat land for farming, near mountains that can provide minerals for that can be mined, um, that sort of thing. And then later on, well, as technology advances, and you see the advance of water wheels, but in that but before that you would just have basically it's farming. So whatever sort of food crops or spices even can be obtained, and then if it's higher mountains or pasture land. So, but for warfare, so that means land that's inhospitable for, and I know I said that wrong, but inhospitable for farming, yet was basically in a position that is like in between one community and another, makes it a good place for a fortification and a castle. Um, and so that controls travel, that acts as a barrier between uh, rival factions, rival lords, nobles, and can help in keeping at bay and preventing banditry. Uh, so in Michael Crichton's timeline, they were talking about I want to call them the Rodin, so basically the people of the forest, and that's because in that time frame, or in the so in primitive medieval time frame, you could either be part of the city community or part of the forest community. So almost like Robin Hood, in the sense that it's a group of people living out in the woods, being a law unto themselves, and in a way, that's not too far beyond the truth, I think, because if you think and consider that only so much of the land was paid, or used, and there's so much other land that just wasn't being used or entered into. Yeah, you could have communities kind of dwelling off, on their own, hidden away from the main traffic and travel and eye of the local nobility. So, but warfare. Uh, so I was thinking that if you had a state of war existing between two factions, two sides were fighting it out, horses, cavalry becomes very important for communication, for screening purposes, the eyes and ears of the army. Um, and that's also well-trained individuals, the people who are well paid as well as well outfitted. So basically, any horseman is kind of lumped together, but they are key important people because of the variety of tasks they can be used for. And that's not even including when they actually get into combat. So you would have a front established, which could be your castles and fortifications, and then they're looking out facing the enemy position, So the enemy would have their own castle, battle line of forts and castles and whatever sort of natural barriers, and you'd have your cavalry just kind of screen between the two areas. You would have your infantry, and the infantry can range from basic peasants who are hired on, uh, once conflict is initiated, given rudimentary weapons, and some basic training. And the other thing to realize is that once conflict starts, the training would start and not end. The more you drilled, the more you trained individuals, the better fighters they would become, the better they would be able to handle situations. So even if they were rude, peasants to begin with, given a year, they could be decent fighters. Um, the and I was thinking that for combat purposes, what you would end up seeing is uh, anybody not doing anything, they would just have their cavalry out screening, keeping an eye out. You'd have lookouts. You'd have high points of ground occupied and used for observation purposes. And then when a person was ready to attack, to make an assault, they would try to screen the movement of their infantry. So they would mass their infantry at one location or more, but have the infantry move to the point where they're going to make their attack. Try to keep the enemy at bay as long as possible using your cavalry, and maybe in some feints, so fake attacks or pretend like they were going to attack somewhere else. And then once the infantry was within range, then you'd also mass your cavalry and try to protect and keep safe that band of infantry as they move to, like, say, lay siege to a town or a castle. The whatever resources they could bring to bear and have on hand would be important as well. But so that I was thinking was just one of the means of combat that you'd probably see employed. There'd be a lot of sitting around. There would be an open state of warfare, but it's kind of sit and wait, see what the enemy does. It's so like chess. How do you play chess? Where you just kind of see what the enemy does and try to act accordingly. And yeah, it makes sense. So how you move your people around. You want to be very strategic and in a way kind of slow. Just take a step back and think, okay, what is my opponent doing? What can I do in response to that? So and something else to realize and consider is that spears it would be a common weapon. It's an easy weapon to produce. It doesn't require much metal, and in the hands of either a semi-skilled or a very skilled fighter, could be quite effective. Basically, the more spears you have, the better. And really, that's the way you'd want to have spears used. You'd want to have individuals who knew that, okay, or basically you train them to the point where like they could fight side by side, create porcupine type formations to help keep the cavalry at bay. And so in a way, it just really nullifies the advantage that cavalry has. And since horses are valuable and in short supply, you kind of in a way would not use them for a lot of combat purposes, except for if the enemy ran, and then you'd have your cavalry chase down. But in the case of keeping them safe, and against spears, yeah, you just wouldn't have it. You'd have your own men, like swordsmen or guys with axes, engage spearmen and make short work of them.